This is the recruiTECH podcast, the cutting-edge podcast in the C region, by professionals for professionals about recruitment and technology. We are here to help professionals in the human resources and recruitment fields navigate the challenges and opportunities of finding and hiring top talents.
This is recruiTECH podcast. My name is Balázs Fertig, and I'm the head of recruitment, onboarding, and employer branding at MBH Bank. And today I'm hosting this podcast about employer branding, and I have two wonderful guests today, international guest speakers on all the main conferences. One of them is Dave Hazlehurst, who is also known as Google Dave, which I have learned in a different podcast that is coming from the golden ages when he was referred as Dave, the one who knows Google search engine optimization very well. So, but besides that, he is an employer branding and digital marketing expert. He is partner and co-owner of PH Creative, which is a creative employer branding agency based in UK, but he's working for global brands all across the globe. Right, Dave?
Yeah, that'll be right. SEO, the old days, yeah. Nice to see you. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Dave. And here we have also Stephen Ehrlich. Ehrlich?
That's it.
Okay, who is important to know for the listeners. If you are after the show Googling him, he's not the architect one who we have like tons of search results on Google.
It's the bane of my existence. And there's also a cryptocurrency guy with my name too.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
But Steve is the Senior Vice President of Global Client Development at Radancy, and he's working across the global markets to help companies to develop strategies to find the right talents for their growth. So gents, thank you very much. I'm sure that the privilege will be to have this conversation with you. And first, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Do you think employer brand is a thing on its own?
Well, yeah, I do. I think employer branding is a critical thing for organizations. I think, though, that there's been an evolution in the space, and I don't think it's the same thing that it was 5 or 10 years ago. I think technology has changed the way that we engage with employer brands. And I think, Dave and I probably have had this conversation with many of our customers, which is that, or his customers too. But the idea is that we are trying to compel people to join an organization. And consumers and candidates used to be far apart. Mm-hmm. Now we're seeing that they're actually the same. Consumers and candidates behave the same way. They use the same tools. They have the same expectations. So I think employer branding is absolutely a thing. It's just a question of what kind of thing is it today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think totally agree with Stephen there. I think, there's a phrase which is, customers will never love a brand unless employees love it first. And I think employer brand is absolutely a thing, and it's our people that power the brand. And I'd say that employer brands like the strategic glue between sort of the business strategy and growth or whatever strategically they're trying to achieve, and the culture and experiences you create. And then it's about how do we bring that alive to attract the right talent and to keep them. So it's definitely a thing.
And I think you said the most important word, which is the culture,
yeah.
Right? Because it's a thing you want to be a part of. Yeah. It's something that compels you to be part of a community, to be an active participant, and that culture piece is really important.
Yeah, and I think we forget that sometimes. We have these labels and badges and things like that, but actually, what does it feel like when you get in there? And is it something that resonates with you, and gives you the sort of that sense of connection and belonging? I think we're in danger at the moment of losing a bit of connection, but I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly.
And actually, as you mentioned, culture, it's not scripted as we previously agreed, but culture is a very important thing for each and every company. However, how you can be unique, but also like self-confident when you are talking about culture, because everyone is saying teamwork and generation diversity and things like that. How you can be unique and authentic in a way in employer branding about your culture?
Again, from my point of view, I think the differentiation is the most important word, uniqueness. And I think it's very difficult. Mm-hmm. There's a certain unknown essence in most organizations that tells you why you want to be there. I was recently at BCG's headquarters in New York, and when you walk in, you feel the culture. Mm-hmm. I can't describe how or why, but it is palpable, it is tangible, it's fantastic. And I think if you go to a consumer experience and you walk into a hotel, if you walk into a Ritz-Carlton or if you walk into a Holiday Inn, both are good hotels, very different price points, but the experience and culture are very different. And how that is manifested is the same thing that organizations have to do for their employees. But it's a tangible essence that you have to wring out of the culture. And then, as Dave said, you have to activate it. You got to bring it to life and show people the authenticity of why you want to be here. It's hard to do.
Yeah. I guess that's why we're here. I think I totally agree with that. I think when you walk into an organisation, you know, I can, if I say pick what a client of ours, I'm not going to name it, but you know, a scale up, high tech company that's trying to disrupt. You go in there and you feel the urgency and this intensity to just keep pushing. You know, and it's pretty scrappy but really full on. Then I can walk into a gaming company and you feel it feels different. But then how do you articulate what that feels like? You know, and that's part of what we're trying to do. And I also agree with what Stephen was saying before is there customers, employees, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And what we're doing is we're creating an overall brand experience. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think you know, we need to have that in front of mind as well.
I think there's also an issue around segmentation, because when you're building an organization, you don't necessarily want every kind of person. You want to build a particular culture. And as you start to think about segmenting it, it's not saying some people are good or some people are bad. It's just about who are the right fits. Who are the kinds of people who are going to be motivated and what drives them? And are you trying to achieve the results that are driven by those types of people? Getting to that understanding before you even build your brand is important. Who are you? Who do you want to be? And then where's the opportunity to grow and build that? And what do you have to do based on the realities that you have today?
Okay. Actually, I'm pretty glad that you mentioned that employer branding is a thing, because it will be a very different conversation if you are saying that it's not. But if we are coming back that employer branding is a thing, what is the number one thing that every recruitment, TA, resourcing or employer branding lead, director, expert should have on their plate? We are not considering AI at the moment. So besides AI, what is the number one thing that everyone should have on their plate?
That's a good question. I'm going to mention AI. I think part of it is a couple of things that we're seeing a lot at the moment is there's lots of disengagement and inconsistency in what's going on, and that bleeds trust. You know, we're bleeding trust. So I think there's a little bit of going back to basics in really trying to understand the humans of who we're trying to connect with and how do we tune into them. And there's lots of technology, and we'll talk about this and how we get messages to them and connect with them. But Stephen's earlier point there, understanding the people and the humans that we want to connect with and how we tune into them. And we don't need to tune into everybody. We just need to tune into the right people and have resonance with them.
Yeah, I agree. And not but. I think that there's a fundamental shift, as I said at the very beginning. I think employer branding now is more than ever about data. You know, we'll come on to AI later on. But data, you know, organizations that we work with all over the world are inundated with data. They don't have insight. And there's a big difference. And if you can get to the insights that are meaningful to your business, that's the important bit. And so for me, if you're an employer branding, you are no longer siloed as an employer brand leader. You need to be a talent leader. And that means you have to understand the technology, the stack that you have, what data you can get from it, what insights you can gather. And then you take that to your team and you start to then develop from that. It's data driven, it's data led, it's insight led. And that to me is what you need to be thinking about.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. You know, there's masses of data out there, and obviously there's lots of technology and AI that can help us figure out what's going on inside of there. But then often you need to speak to a human to find out, well, why is that? What is that thing? You know, and sometimes it's what they say or something that they don't say, but the way they react that makes you go, hold on a second, what was that? You know, and that's when we zoom in. And then I think the other thing, just thinking it through, is, you know, this brand love starts within. You know, we're seeing a lot of our clients, the world's gone a bit mad in terms of recruitment and stuff like this at the moment with some of our clients, especially from an external point of view. And it's also about how are you connecting internally with communities and leveraging them, not just as people, but as channels to talent. And I think that's, we're seeing that dialed up a lot at the moment from some of our clients.
You just have to give them something that they can believe and that they're willing to take to market. And I think, you know, advocacy, to your point, you know, if you can give your employees those channels, those opportunities to tell stories on your behalf that they really believe in, they'll be the best advocates you have. But it's got to get to that essence. And to Dave's point, I think when in the old days, I put that in inverted commas, right? You know, when we started to look at employer branding, it was an argument, a fight for funding from the C-suite. Yes, we're going to do this project. And then it was a 12-month process of research and focus groups and analysis. And by the time you got to the answer, the market had moved on.
Yeah.
Now technology lets you do it much faster, much better, deeper insights. using AI. We'll talk about it later. But I think there's ways to be more engaged in the marketplace. Organizations that have surveys on their career site or Peakon and tools like that for internal engagement. Gathering that data and then finding a way to get the insight from it allows you to get to the most important bit, which is the creativity of what we do. That emotional connection with an individual that says, yes, this is the place I'm interested in. So I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of AI and tech when we get there.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the part you were mentioning that internally it should be very much get into the DNS of the employees about employer branding, because if they don't believing it, they will never say it in a bar, having some beers with friends saying that, yeah, that's true. So it's...
And what you just said there is spot on. We talk like we're these experts in employer branding and things like this. But what did it say when you're in the bar? Sometimes I just go back to basics. Like if we're in a bar, what are we saying? What would we say to people? And sometimes you don't need to say it. You just need to be interested in them first for them to become interested in you. But you need to know what bar to go into. You know what I mean? And then it's about engagement and conversations. And then really what we're doing is we're taking that human principle and then deploying that and leveraging all the technology and the insights and data and stuff like that. But, I go back, I remember 2014, I was like, social media is just like going to a pub and just speak to people like you and me, work out what pub and work out what the conversation is.
Yeah.
To carry your pub analogy forward, because who doesn't love a pub analogy? Right? I think you've nailed it, which is thousands of companies in the world, all of them are different pubs. And depending on, we've all been into a pub that we go, oh, we don't like this place, let's walk out. And we've been to a place that go, oh, we love it. It's like home. It's like Cheers, the old TV show.
Yeah.
So again, individuals will make choices about the types of organizations that they consider their cheers. How do you understand who they are? And then how do you start to have that conversation with them? That's the important piece.
And coming back to your point about the data, what are the data or KPIs you are considering as most important or advising your clients when they are running any employer branding campaign that please consider this one? Because in the old days, it was very easy to say that how many views you have on your video, whatever, 5 million views, you can blind the guy and that it was an amazing campaign. Right now, we have more data, we need more insights. So what are the main KPIs you're always considering in an employer branding campaign?
I'll let Dave go first because I have a complex answer. I don't know.
I think we've all got a complex answer. So that's actually a big question. That is a big question. I think as headlines, and then we'll probably go a little bit deeper, is we need to measure what matters against what we're trying to achieve. And there's sort of measurements. If it's recruitment marketing, for example, there's, all kinds of impressions and reach, and then we move into conversions. But the smarter companies are also looking at the quality of application, the quality of hire. And we need to be getting to a place where we can link it through to the performance of people. And inside of there is a spaghetti junction of technology that needs to talk to each other and things like that. But what I would do is I would start at the beginning and go, what's the business objectives and what we're trying to do? How does people strategy plug into that? What are the 3 or 4 big magic numbers? And then the numbers underneath are showing we're moving towards that direction. But it depends how we deploy it. Is it recruitment marketing campaigns? How are they coming onto the career site? How are we measuring that? How are we measuring experience? How are we measuring onboarding, quality, et cetera, et cetera? And I'll hand it over to Steve.
Again, I'm going to echo exactly what you said. The question we always ask our customers is, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Before we come up with an answer to the problem, what is the problem? And I think, as we look at it, my ultimate goal for our customers is hiring the right people faster, less expensively. Who are the right people is the question. And is it a question of persistence, longevity, the quality, all the things Dave said. The challenge is that in a lot of organizations, and I'm not trying to cause a conflict here, there's a very short-term approach to this. Somebody says, let's do the employer branding. Yeah, we got to do it, tick the box. We've gone off to market. They don't truly activate it, and they don't have the systems in place to measure it. And you said the spaghetti junction. We call it point solutions. Organizations have 20 different point solutions, and none of them talk to each other. There's no resonance. There's no connectivity, and they end up with a problem. So we're moving from point solutions to platforms where there's a single source of truth that allows you to then measure every step on the journey. And so to get deeper for a second, imagine that you build your employer brand, you know who you're trying to talk to, and you create a piece of content, right? Content's difficult to do, but you got to do a lot of it, and it's got to be fresh and authentic. What if you put that on your career site and nobody clicks on it? What if you put it on there, somebody reads it, and then the next action is they leave your site? What you want to do is measure the quality and efficacy of your content, the stories that you're telling, so that when somebody goes down that funnel process, you know what content made them click apply. Did you hire them? Have they stayed with you? There's a longitudinal look at all of this stuff, which I don't think organizations have enough interest in that long-term approach to it. But what's your business challenge? Is it reducing your cost per application? Is it hiring people? So again, Dave's point is right. It's complex.
Yeah, I think. And Radancy you folks do some great work on this around the data and the insights. And I think, we can get a bit hung up on the measurement side because there's just so much of it. And that question alone, what should we be measuring, comes back to everything we've just said. I mean, something else in terms of the experience I think is important that doesn't get talked about probably enough. Because we're looking at sort of vanity metrics. Oh, we've got loads of followers, or we've got lots of reach and lots of impressions. So what, basically, And I know you folks do quite a lot of work around the experience of the career site and what does it feel like. And I think if we go into the consumer world again, they're far more strategic and thoughtful about what are they measuring. I remember we worked with Vacamp, who are the biggest digital retailer in Holland, but they were when we worked with them. They were obsessed with NPS score to customer, absolutely obsessed with it. And they believed that they have 75, profit will take care of itself. But when you walk in the building, you feel it. Literally to the point where you go and have a coffee in the canteen and people are eating lunch and there's postcards everywhere. Like, what are all these postcards? And people are handwriting messages of thanks to customers, and they go in every package that's sent. And that's a really simple way of them driving behaviour through the culture and the values of the business and their employer brand. And it's having a direct impact with a number that everybody understands. And that's about NPS. So, I think you guys do a great job in terms of digitally from an NPS point of view and understand experience. But I think that is a metric that should follow all the way through. It's just something I think a lot about in terms of how people are feeling.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because we definitely agree. And on our career site platform, one of the tools that is on the main page is a candidate feedback tool. It's a survey. It's real time. And we've had 2.5 million people take it in the last 18 months. And it's 4 different surveys. It asks the same questions of all of our customers. So 700 different companies have their people feed into it. We've got aggregated data all over the world. But the one most interesting question, to your point, is it'll say, did you find, and then it's all, some, most of, or none of the content I was looking for on the site. And when somebody says I found all or most of the content, so going back to the employer brand, Net Promoter Score, off the charts, way up top right, in the graph. And I think that's the point, which is people don't want to have to search anymore. They want to discover. They want to find the information that's going to help them make a considered choice. And if you focus on the Net Promoter Score and you're delivering what your customer or your candidate wants, to your point about the postcards, you win.
To completely agree with that. And I think businesses lose sight of that sometimes. I'm just writing a piece at the moment, and I think there's a bit of a silent pandemic going on in the workplace. McKinsey and Gartner have just brought out research where CEOs' priorities are growth, transformation, and AI. And yet employees are feeling disconnected, dehumanized, and disconnected, and disengaged. And there's kind of a tension there. We want to drive technology and AI to drive performance and growth and transformation never stops. Let's face it, I think we're in a constant state of transformation. We need a new word. But we've got employees that are feeling a little bit, we're not sure, and I think there's a bit of a crossroads coming along. How are people feeling? If we start there, what's the experience like across a journey? I think we'll be in a better place in terms of, trying to bring this back together a little bit more.
I think that you're right. And I think that people-centered organizations, I believe, will continue to outperform those that aren't. And if there's a disconnect between what the C-suite wants in terms of efficiencies and all the things that you mentioned, I don't think employees are upset about that. They want to know how they play into it. What does it mean to them? What's the opportunity? And I was at Talent Connect in London the other day, and interestingly, Anish was talking about the future, the Chief Economic Opportunity Officer at LinkedIn. And he was saying that technology used to be something that humans took care of. Right? We had IT people and everything else. Now technology is going to be the thing that fuels human innovation. And so I think, yes, we can get efficiencies for the C-suite, but we can also enable our people to do really amazing things using the new tools. And if you bring them on that journey, that story about how you're going to play your role in this and how we're going to upskill you and give you a career path and opportunities, you start to really win. And that's that human focus piece. But it doesn't move the needle in terms of the efficiency. You still have to go to market in a smart way, measure your costs and drive costs down and be more efficient. And you can do that with AI and some other tools, which we can talk about later.
Yeah, and we mentioned we will talk about AI later. So definitely this is the time for talking about AI. I'm having conversation with a lot of HR directors, and they are saying that now we are there, that AI is kind of capable to do majority of the jobs what a junior colleague is doing. However, if we are not hiring juniors, we will never have seniors. So it's kind of a disconnect in a way that how we can the best leverage AI. How we can best leverage AI in employer branding? What is your view?
Go on, Stephen, over to you.
Again, I have a very specific view. We've been doing this a very long time. As I said before in the chat we've had, we used to do long-term focus groups and all this kind of stuff. And I think what AI is really good at is being a force multiplier for you to be able to assess large amounts of structured data quickly. So if you use an AI tool to conduct your focus groups and to be able to get to the common themes, you can do it very quickly and you get to the essence that emerges. I think that's a hugely powerful tool for AI and employer branding. I'm not a fan necessarily of AI content creation without a human. I think the human needs to be involved in it. And I think, if we equip our juniors, as you call them, with the opportunity to use these tools, they will become seniors. And so you may need fewer juniors, but you still need people.
Absolutely.
So again, some of the stuff I've been writing at the moment, you think about, we're in the world of people and HR, which is human resource. So the way I'm sort of thinking about it at the moment, AI is like the resource. So let AI do the repeatable, the efficiency, pulling things together, finding trends, but let humans do the remarkable. Yep. Let them do the creativity, the imagination, the intuition, the instinct. And I think, if we accept that that's where we are, I think that's where we're better placed. And there's lots of research around creativity in AI. I was reading something from Harvard that the more and more we're using it, the divergence of ideas is reducing.
Homogenization of content. Yeah,
that's right. So that's an interesting thought. But just on this juniors thing, the juniors will probably show most of us how to use AI. Do you know what I mean? So let's not forget that. So Absolutely. You might find the juniors become seniors a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I use a lot of bad analogies. And you're in the banking world, right? So I remember going to the bank, and I knew the bank manager and I knew the bank teller. And they introduced this thing called the cash machine. And everybody said, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go see my friend, Balázs at the bank. Well, then I didn't see Balázs anymore because I went to the machine. Now I do everything on my phone. Absolutely. So technology becomes an enabler for a new way of life. And humans have to deal with change. And change is difficult. But I think from a creativity point of view, to me, AI is no different than picking up a paintbrush. Mm-hmm. You're deciding what to do. You're saying to AI, design me a picture of this. You're giving it the prompt. You're asking it to create the content. And when you start to think about AI, I'll digress for a second, but you see where I'm going. If you have a career site and your career site becomes your own, what I'll call LLM, where you control the content on it, you decide the narrative, the tone of voice, the stories you put there, and then you build an AI engine to take that and use that to learn from, that can start to create stuff that really fits your brand. And you can then look at it as a human and go, yeah, we can tweak it a little bit. But it's just like using a paintbrush. You're just training it a different way. You're using a different kind of tool to create creativity.
I totally agree with all of that. We were chatting before, actually, the greatest sort of technology that's ever, the greatest technology things that have happened to us, the innovations, they just become part of the norm. Like, we don't know we're using them, and I think, I really started using AI probably 18 months ago. And I often used to say, you're using AI. You say, who's using AI at the moment? You put out people like, and I think it was Seth Godin was like, if you're not using AI for at least 20 minutes every day, you're falling behind kind of thing. And now it's like, I watch my son. So my son is doing a chemistry degree, and that's like different language to me. I haven't got a clue what he's even looking at. But when he was studying to do his exams, he looked at all the past papers and he printed them off and everything else. Then he started asking ChatGPT, but he wasn't typing. He was asking it. Yeah. He's asking it, and we were laughing before. We're moving to a world of Star Trek where you touch the badge, you can speak to the computer, it will do whatever you want, live translations, So the best technology is that we use that we don't realise we're using it. And it will find that these things will just become part of our natural way of doing things. However, I think Stephen's spot on. You still need the imagination, the creativity of humans if we want to connect with humans. And I think we can't forget that.
Yeah, but I agree. And I think, we're very focused at Radancy on the natural language processing piece of it, where you speak to things, you ask it questions that you would normally ask. And I'll give you an example just of where transformation happens. We are conditioned to go to Google for a search. Yep. No offense, Google Dave, right?
It's all right.
Yeah, and SEO is important, right? Yeah. And so you go up there and you put in a search query and you get back 12 blue links. That's what we expected. And Google's always trying to transform their search experience. So those 12 blue links were what we thought were the trusted sources. Somebody done a lot of work in SEO to be number one on the organic rankings. There's some paid, whatever it is. Great. The evolution has gone to Google snippets, where they start to try to own you on that page. And now we're seeing that they've introduced search generative experience, where they're using a generative AI to have a conversation with you, and you ask it different kinds of questions. And so what we're seeing is that if you have a number one organic search result, now with generative AI, you're pushed 150% down the page. So you're being disintermediated by the technology. And when you think about what you do, now people are asking questions not about finance jobs in Budapest. They're saying, I have a degree in English, and I'm interested in finding a role for me that takes advantage of my arts and sciences degree that will allow me to work in finance. That's a very different search query. Yeah. And so if you are creating content, if you are telling stories, you now have to think about the new Google Dave and what, but seriously, what are you doing to be found in the search engine? How are you taking advantage of search generative AI? How are you taking advantage of natural language processing? And how are you, most importantly, coming back to the point of this podcast, how are you creating employer brand content that is found by those tools? Because your jobs have to be surfaced, your content has to be surfaced, and people then have a choice to self-select in or self-select out. But you have to control that narrative. And if you're not ready for it, you're in trouble, because to your point, if you're not using AI every day for 20 minutes, 2 hours, 6 hours, you're falling behind. Yeah. And most companies today are still in the experimental, I don't know what to do phase, or they have a bunch of point solutions that don't talk to each other, and they can't implement a real AI solution.
Yeah, so I completely agree with all of that. So a couple of things there are, and just quickly, is, again, it's being driven by human behavior, and Google's putting its latest tech solution, if you like, in front of you to try and drive your behavior to use that. And there's lots of noise in the SEO space. There has been for a while now. How is AI changing this? So I completely agree with what Stephen's saying. But ultimately, do we trust what it's telling us? And I think people are still in the phase of, or just coming out of the phase of, what is AI? Now it's like, well, how do we use it? Yeah. But the juniors are talking to it and they're using it, and they're light years ahead. But I do think there's a question of, are we trusting what it's given us at the moment, and where do we feel about that? Some people are all over it. Some people are like, well, my wife's like, oh, I'm not quite sure, But again, to what Stephen and the folks do over there is, they're getting real time data and they're seeing what's resonating.
But it's not just about the real time data. I think I'm doing a presentation later on the main stage, and I'm talking about the sources of your knowledge. And if you compare ChatGPT and DeepSeek, just as two examples, and you ask them both about Tiananmen Square, ChatGPT will come back and tell you exactly what happened in 1989. There was a massacre. DeepSeek says nothing happened. What are you talking about? Because it doesn't mean that one's model is better than the other. It's about how it was trained. And so when you start thinking about the use of AI, and that's why I come back to what I said earlier about career sites. If you build your career site as your LLM, you control the messaging, and you train your AI, you can then guarantee that the message that's going out there is right, not a hallucination. We've tested AI for years. I mean, it's funny, you said you've been using it for 18 months. We've been doing it for 12 years. We've been in the space for a very long time, and not generative AI, obviously. But we've learned that if you don't have clean, structured data, if you don't have a trusted source, it's garbage. It is exactly what you said. There's no point in trusting it. And then it becomes an employer branding problem. It becomes a talent attraction problem. So you got to be really careful.
See, I think part of the wider challenge there is, general public don't understand it enough and how it gets to those decisions. So interesting times.
It's confirmation bias, right? You ask it a question, you get an answer back, you go, that's the answer.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
We are just running out of time, so I would like to admit that we were not the most diverse panel. So 3 white male, Generation X. So we should finish
but
something.
2 of us have no hair.
Yeah, but we should
follicle deficient.
Yeah, we should finish definitively with something masculine stuff. So, Dave, first question to you: that as you are. I know that you are a diehard Liverpool fan, and you are just in the home country of Szoboszlai. Your main man in the midfield. How do you see the chances for the Reds to get the Premier League title this year?
You see, I don't want to say it. I think it's very promising. I think it's been an interesting, a fast, brilliant season. We had a tough week last week, but. I'm not going to say it, but I'm very, very hopeful. And I know Stephen is an Arsenal fan.
Well, international football is more my speed, but we'll just say you're cautiously optimistic, right?
Cautiously optimistic.
Steve, I will not ask you about Arsenal, but I'm pretty much sure that you don't know that in the 2015 draft, on the 3rd round with the 62nd pick, New York Rangers have selected a guy called Robin Kovács. Kovács means Smith in English. This is a pretty common name in Hungarian. He was actually Swedish, but with Hungarian origins. How do you see the Rangers' chances to getting some results this year?
Balázs, so what you don't know is that I am a lifelong New York Rangers fan. My family had season tickets. I mean, we have been through the highs and the lows. It is a disaster right now. It's a rebuilding time. Unfortunately, I think what was interesting was the last couple of seasons we had a real shot at it, and it kind of fell apart. But there's some great players. It's just we need to get a team that gels. When in ice hockey, for me, I call them lunch pail guys. When you don't have stars, but people who show up every day, do their job, and perform well, you win. And I think right now we don't have that right mix. But next season, hopefully.
Okay, so the 5th Stanley Cup is soon in the...
I was there in 1994. And I hope to be there again in my lifetime, as they said, but it's been a long time, so we'll see.
Okay. Jenks, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. We just run out of time. As I learned in one of the James Bond movies, the pleasure was all mine to have this conversation with you.
It was ours. So thank you very much for inviting us.
I really appreciate it. And thank you for the listeners to staying with us till the end, as we are not sharing any coupon code for discounted prices for the next recruiTECH event. You were very generous with your time. Hope you enjoyed this session. If you do so, please do the social media thing. So like, share, comment, and follow recruiTECH podcast on your favorite podcast player. If you didn't like it, then connect us on LinkedIn and share your view. And actually, I have also learned that all of us is on X, or actually everyone call it Twitter. So you can find us also on Twitter. We are very much Gen X. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening us.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.